Welcome to At Issue. I'm H. Wayne Wilson, and for the next half hour we're going to be talking about state parks, hunting, things of that nature, because we have the director of the Illinois Department of Natural Resources with us. So we're going to be talking a lot about Wildlife Prairie State Park's future. We're going to be talking about Rice Lake. We'll be talking about Dixon Mounds, all under the IDNR banner. And to do that, we have with us Mark Miller. Mark is the director of the Department of Natural Resources. We'll say IDNR for the rest of the show.
Fantastic. Welcome. Thank you, H, for having me back on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Before we talk about the specifics, let's talk about overall impact. What kind of economic impact does IDNR have on the state, et cetera?
Well, overall, with all of the programs, regulatory functions, we have a $32 billion economic impact. We can break that down even further by looking at our state parks. We have roughly over 40 million visits to our state parks each year. That ends up with a $1 billion economic impact to the state. And then when you look also at our hunting, fishing, our overall conservation, and it helps with wildlife watching activities, that is also a $4.2 billion economic impact. So overall, DNR has a lot of activities that help the state's economy.
How much land do you manage?
500,000 acres, 329 different sites. About 120 state parks, but we have fish and wildlife areas, natural areas, trails, and that takes a great deal of resources.
Where do you rate compared to other states?
Oh, in terms of public lands and per capita for public recreational access, we're 48th out of 50th. So Illinois is really at the bottom in terms of public recreational spaces.
I want to talk about funding first. The gambling bill that did not pass had some money earmarked for natural resources. It didn't say for Department of Natural Resources, it just said for natural resources. Was any of that money for your department to help you?
Well, there were some pieces in there. My understanding that the bill had a couple of Christmas tree items that would have passed through DNR. We didn't take a real good look at that because the resources would have been passed through. I think that there were a lot of things that would have been promised as a part of that bill.
There is a bill still pending at this point to increase the license renewal from $99 to $101, a $2 increase. That money, that $2, dedicated to IDNR. What kind of impact might that have? Well,
that is a tremendous impact for us, and the sustainability bill, as we're calling it, Senate Bill 1566, has overall a $32 million fee possibility for us, revenue possibility. 22 to 18 million of that were from the $2 increase in license fees that would go specifically for state parks. So half of that money would go for capital improvements, and the other half would go towards operations.
That's not a lot of money, because I was doing some research on this, and I see that there's $750 million in backlog in maintenance alone.
That's correct. That's correct.
30 million, however it's spent, isn't much of an impact on that.
Well, it gives us more than what we have today. And you know, when we look at the $750 million projects that are needed and necessary at our state parks, that didn't happen in 1 year. That happened over 12 years to get us to that point. With the life expectancy of our roads, our roofs, our sewage treatment plants, our water towers, all the other infrastructure that we have, much of that was going to come come to a point where they needed to have repairs. We need to address those issues, and this money, $9 to $12 million a year, will help us with additional projects.
In order to balance the budget, you've taken a hit over the last decade. How much of a hit personnel-wise?
Well, personnel, 12 years ago we had 2,600 people. We've lost 54% of our staff. We're down to around 1,200 and less right now. And that's had a tremendous impact on our state parks and on other areas. What's been driving that has been a reduction in our general revenue funds, the money that people send into the state April 15th. general revenue funds accounted for more than half of our budget 12 years ago, and now it's less than 15%. We've lost $107 million there, and that's a 58% reduction, I believe.
Have you closed any facilities?
No.
But you have to cut someplace.
We do, but Governor Quinn has made it very clear that we're going to keep our parks open. If you recall, right before we came in the Quinn administration, our preceding governor had closed some state parks. We vowed never to close them and keep them open for the public who enjoys them. And so closing a state facility would be our last resort. Now, however, I must say that with all that deferred maintenance, when we have a public safety issue, perhaps a storm comes through, we have trees that are, or perhaps would injure a hiker or a biker on a trail, we do close sections down. And if we have a road that is impassable because of a washout, we close that area until we have the ability to fix it. And oftentimes that means that certain parts of our parks will be closed.
Staying on the money aspect, you're talking about Senate Bill 1566 with the $2 fee, et cetera. What about fees associated with attendance at a park, whether that be parking, whether that be an entry fee of some kind? Are you looking at that possibility?
Well, we actually did look at that possibility as part of the sustainability package. And we found in working with all of our constituents, our main sponsor, Frank Montino from Spring Valley, worked through this, and we found that that particular idea had a lot of issues that would have been detrimental in some areas. So the entrance fee for state parks is no longer being considered. We feel that the $2 license plate increase or fee will be one that will be cleaner, better implemented, and better for our state park system.
How would you manage an entry fee?
Well, that's the issue. I mean, when you think about many of our state parks, we don't have national parks with two entrances where you can put gates up and collect money. We have parks with county roads running through them. Kankakee River State Park is a long linear park with 26 different parking lots. It would be virtually impossible for us and might actually be counterproductive in terms of trying to find money for operations and for capital.
So you've kept the parks open. You're not charging entry fees. You are looking at the $2 increase in the license renewal. What have you cut? You had to cut someplace other than, I know personnel, you've cut more than half.
Right, and that all didn't, that reduction didn't all happen on my watch, but we have taken an assessment to look at our programs, and if we had something that was not fitting our core function of protecting, enhancing, managing our natural resources, we've placed some of those things in the cutting list so that we can repurpose the money that we do have. One of the things that was very painful for me to do was to cut back and stop publishing our Outdoor Illinois magazine. Popular, great way to communicate natural resource issues, our state parks, encourage people to visit our areas. But we had to repurpose that money so we can keep our core program strong. And that's one of the many things that we've done to correct, which was last year a $22 million deficit. So we've made a lot of cuts and have done a lot of cutbacks in programs so that we can keep everything working that we have.
Let's talk about some specific parks around Central Illinois. Wildlife Prairie State Park. About 10 years ago or so, Bill Rutherford decided that he was going to donate the park to the state. And the state did initially put money into the park, but you haven't the last 2 years. Now there's a bill that has not yet passed to return that park. Can you explain why and what the status of that is?
Well,
and I know it's a legislative issue
right.
That's somewhat out of your control, but
well, it certainly is out of our control. But we were approached by State Senator Dave Kaler, who championed this idea and championed the issue at the state park, to transfer it back to a private foundation where it came from, essentially, so that it can be managed and have more opportunities and have a little bit more freedom in order to make revenues and keep the park running. It passed through the Senate and stalled in the House. But we think that when the process moves through, that there will be a resolution to this, and that there will be an opportunity to do the right thing. I want to also say that even though it's designated a state park, DNR has never had any of its employees working there. It's always been run by a private foundation, and I think that in operating this facility, there are opportunities for revenues that we perhaps can't do ourselves or do for them or help them do. So this is why this is important, to move this back to the Friends of Wildlife Prairie Park and let them have the best possibility of making it successful.
Is IDNR putting money into it?
No, I mean we for the last several years have not given any, have not had in our operational lines anything for them. The General Assembly has zeroed that out. And we are trying to help them everywhere that we can, but there's no operational money there for them.
Let's, Wildlife Prairie State Park, the state may or may not stay in that name,
right.
But was built on an abandoned mine. There were a lot of contour changes during that strip mining time. And it happens that IDNR has an abandoned mines land reclamation program.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain to me how that works and where that money comes from?
Well, there is a pot of federal money that gets allocated out to the states depending on a formula. And what it allows the state of Illinois to do is to take that money and address some of the legacy issues from coal mining that have been around on our landscape. Acid mine drainage, vegetation management, spoils, dealing with spoil piles that might be hot. All of those things need to be addressed for the environment. So we take that federal money and make those corrections. And honestly, we need to have more than we are currently receiving, because there's plenty of issues out there to address to improve water quality and wildlife habitat, and so we're always looking for that. Now, federally, because of the budget issues in Congress, we're unsure as to what our next allocation is going to be and when we're going to receive it, but we hope that soon, because we do need to address some of those issues that are out there from the legacy.
And this is money that can be spent on private land?
Private and public lands. And so if there's an area out there that needs addressed that's privately held, we can do a request for proposal and send a contractor out there to address those water management or pollution management needs.
Dixon Mounds, down on Route 97, is under your purview. But, and I want to talk a little bit about Dixon Mounds, but I want to talk about the cooperative nature that's going on and how you got into this and why you got into cooperating with the Nature Conservancy, which operates Emiquon, which is right adjacent to Dixon Mounds, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which has 3,000 acres next to the 7,000 acres of Nature Conservancy, and also the University of Illinois at Springfield runs a water quality lab there. How did this all come about, and what's the benefit?
I think that the entire complex is a tremendous opportunity and shows what can happen when you bring in partners for conservation, economic development, natural resource protection, and science. You have all of these partners who have come together essentially around the TNC Emiquon project, and it includes the Illinois State Museum's Dixon Mounds. The Illinois State Museum is part of DNR, and we've benefited by creating attention and having this gateway tourist opportunity of Emiquon, bringing people into the area to enjoy wildlife watching, to see the museum, learn about the area, and truthfully, when we look at how conservation projects and science are going to be funded in the future, we need to be leveraging everyone's dollars and resources, and this is a great way to do that.
The reference to TNC Emiquon is the Nature Conservancy is TNC, just
yes.
so they. So how has you being most concerned about Dixon Mountains. Has there been a benefit there?
Oh, absolutely. All the attention there and has created more people coming to the Havana area, and our visitorship is up substantially.
We want to talk a little bit about Rice Lake. There's some controversy down there. Rice Lake has for many years it's had a levee along the river, and there are some eagle nests there. You are in the process in cooperation with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, redeveloping Rice Lake. Are you concerned about the current eagles, and how is that working into your long-term goals?
Well, let me first say that the project that we're undertaking now with the Corps of Engineers is an environmental management project, and that's set up to correct some of the issues that are part of the legacy of having water management by the Corps of Engineers for navigation. That's the original intent. And this project is a project that we've been working towards for well over a decade to try to correct some of the flood flow issues that occurs now on the Illinois River system. We want to have a more natural system where the floods come up and then they go down over a season. And because of all the changes, the man-made changes with navigation or with Chicago and the suburbs putting more water into the Illinois River much more quickly, there's no longer a natural regime. And so what we're trying to do is mimic that by controlling the water in and out. Now, in doing that project, which we are now working, the Corps of Engineers is now under construction, we are very closely looking at whether or not eagles are present. We're impacting eagles, we're impacting habitat for Indiana bats, and we're working with the Corps of Engineers to ensure that none of those resources are threatened or impacted while they are doing the construction.
You talked about the natural flow of the elevation of the water, but there's the levee. How are you going to handle that with the levee sitting there?
Well, the levees my understanding is the project is enhancing that control structure, and we're putting in control structures to allow water in and out at the appropriate time. So this won't impact very high floods, but it will help us with the lower flashy floods that happen now all throughout the summer that didn't happen historically. And the idea there is to protect wildlife. And one of the things that often guides me is my appreciation for conservation ethic. Aldo Leopold, the father of modern conservation movement, said that a thing is right when it tends to protect the biotic integrity of a place, is wrong when it tends otherwise. And with this particular project, although it's fraught with some of these smaller controversies over specific species, we're working through that. But overall, I feel that this will be right for the ecology of the place overall. The
Sierra Club is the foremost of the organizations that's fighting to protect the eagles. What kind of relationship does IDNR have with Sierra Club and the other organizations, not just with regard to Rice Lake, but overall?
Well, overall, I think that it's important for conservation and environmental groups to be engaged in the process, and Sierra Club, without them advocating for their point of view, there wouldn't be anyone to hold state employees and state agencies accountable. So I think it's very important that they play this role, and I think we have a very good relationship with Sierra Club. And actually, one of the things that I think I'm proud of too is that the Governor Quinn appointed a Sierra Club to be a part of the Natural Resource Advisory Board. And I think that's a good step. We want to make sure we have a good relationship and we listen to their concerns.
There have been requests to mine coal on property that you manage. Banner Marsh, one of them. What is IDNR's policy with regard to coal mining?
Well, first of all, Banner Marsh was mined before we took it over. So it's one of those reclaimed or not so reclaimed mines that then came to the state of Illinois. We know that there are a lot of areas where there's coal underneath or resources underneath a state park or a state fish and wildlife area, and we don't have enough natural areas now to meet the recreational needs. So to take one of those areas out in order to mine for coal would be something that would be counter to our values of promoting and enhancing recreational access.
I think we have to talk about the drought. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is farmers, but everybody was affected by the drought. How was IDNR impacted?
Impacted greatly by the drought. One, we had a burn ban for most of the year at almost all of our sites that prohibited campers from burning open flame campfires. We had issues with fisheries, fish kills that occurred sometimes at our sites or places that we managed. That was an impact to the natural resource that happens in a drought. We also we're looking at potential impacts this fall for waterfowl hunting areas. I think, though, that Hurricane Isaac and some of the rains we've had since then have lessened the concerns there. But we also have impacts to our forests, and we do not know what those are going to be because it may take several years before we start to see the impacts to tree health, individual trees, as a result of this drought. So we'll be watching, and it may take us several years to understand what happened this summer.
Another arena where the drought has had at least a marginal impact is that some farmers knock down their fields, and there's a grain out in there. You have a policy with regard to hunting, and hunting season is coming up, with regard to, I don't, correct my terminology, but excessive amount of grain sitting out in a field.
Right. Well, one of the issues is that farmers who are working with their crop insurance advisors are being told that the appropriate thing to do is to disc under or to mow down, bush hog, the standing corn crop, and they were doing that to comply with their insurance policies. If they do that, that is considered atypical agricultural practice, and the federal rules on baiting are to not allow hunting in an area where a non-traditional agricultural practice or something that's not a traditional practice occurs. That's done to promote fair chase, values, ethics, and to make sure that hunters aren't taking more than their fair share and an unfair advantage over the wildlife. So when you have fields like this where they've been mowed down, the federal rules would indicate that this is a baited field, and hunters are not allowed to hunt in those areas. So we ask that all the hunters do the right thing ethically and for conservation, and make sure that they're aware of their surroundings and know where they're hunting and know whether or not that wildlife has been impacted by any baited areas.
Any changes coming up for hunting season?
There is one. There was a law passed and signed by Governor Quinn where you can use crossbows in the latter half of the archery season. Formerly, in the first half of the season, you had to be over 62 or have a doctor's permission for being handicapped, but in the latter half now, anyone who wants to use a crossbow after a certain Saturday in November will be able to use crossbows. So that's the change, and it's new.
In the remaining 90 seconds or so that we have, what challenges do you, as the director of IDNR, what challenges do you see?
In the future, I think that, and I've directed my 3 years at the agency to deal with this, but public recreational access, we have to address those issues and provide opportunities for people. We have to bring new people into conservation, youth, women, families, so that we can get to the third thing, which is sustainable funding. You know, for the last 75 years, funding has been supported by sportsmen, and it's been tremendously successful, but as we look to the future and the changing demographics, we have to find a model that funds conservation, because we now know we can't rely on general revenue from the state. We have to find another way to do our business of conservation. And with that, a half hour has gone by. Mark Miller, thank you so much for the update on the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. Thank you very much for having me. And we'll be back next week with another edition of At Issue. This time we're going to be talking about planned giving. There's the potential to change federal laws with regard to estates and how they're handed down in a family. And we're going to talk about planned giving and how that may help out
join us, and you'll be able to call in next week. So join us in 1 week for a discussion right here on At Issue.